everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 19. Last episode, we sort of started talking about the transportation episode, and I mentioned that we might need to do one more episode. At the time, I said a half episode to wrap up some things before we start expanding out on the city, and it turns out that needed to be a full episode, so this is that episode. We're doing one more, and then episode 20 will sort of be, well, really a big turning point in this project. I want to talk more about sort of what this project has been so far and where we're going from here. But before we do that, let me talk about what's happening in this episode. So last time we built that big, kind of marketplace area and sort of commercial district on the other side of the main avenue underneath this big interchange thing. This side was slated out to be part of a park, so the very first order of business is to connect up these two parks through these underground walkways. I'm not going crazy with these underground walkways, but the main objective of this is to make sure that any part of a city that is designed specifically to be heavy commercial or some sort of marketplace needs to have high walkability, easy to walk between all the different areas, lots of pedestrian walkways in the middle of the blocks. And this is one of those areas. Another one of those areas is on the other side of our big commercial downtown, other side of the big, I guess the central station is what we're calling it in the first few episodes. But on the other side of that, there's another section kind of like this. And then, of course, the big park just south of the central station. So all of these areas need to be connected via, walkways, and they are for the most part. But the bigger thing is that any future areas that are like this, which there'll be plenty of in other parts of the city, I want to have all of these connected by really clear and effective public transit. So we're going to have metro lines that go directly from one to the other. And the goal is, if you're going from anywhere in the city to any of these sort of commercial hubs or marketplaces, it's very easy to take public transit and then walk around to your destination. So that should minimize traffic in a lot of areas, and that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on putting down these pedestrian walkways around this area. But with all that said, that's mostly what's going on in this episode. I'm not going to do anything crazy. I wanted to also do some nighttime work to make sure that all the lighting looks good underneath these highways. They're pretty dark, and I'm sort of trying to implement that like blue glowing sort of theme that we're doing in a lot of other areas. So we're going to have some of that later on as well. But aside from that, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the next few episodes and what we've been doing so far. So this is, like I said, sort of a big marker in the project. We're just about to be 20 episodes in, and I've been shooting for the 20 episode mark as the point where we start some really rapid expansion outwards and the city starts to grow like exponentially. We're going to have a much higher population in the next few episodes. We're going to have a lot more roads and a lot more surface area covered. In fact, the city will probably triple or quadruple in size in the next episode. So definitely check that one out. That's going to be like one of the biggest episodes we've done so far. And it's going to be really focused on infrastructure and on laying out some new roads and designing the rest of the city. So before we wanted to get into that, I had a few things, kind of like a checklist of things that I wanted to get done and ensure we had set up and squared away before we start expanding. The first one of those is to test the infrastructure. So like I said in the very first episode, we designed a very complex highway infrastructure, and we spent a lot of time thinking about where things should be, where entrances and exits should be. And no matter how much time you spend planning that out, you can really only see in practice how effective it is. So I wanted to get our population up to around 30,000 or so just to see how well this thing handles traffic. And to make that even more of an effective testing scenario, I didn't add any public transit lines or any public transit of any kind. I also did not connect our outside rail connection very intentionally, so we could make sure that this whole infrastructure could hold up to quite a bit of road traffic. So you might have noticed we never connected that outside train connection. We don't have any metro lines yet. None of that stuff is implemented, and as far as I can tell, we have a pretty solid highway infrastructure that's handling all the traffic just fine. We have a few areas, mostly just highway connections that are coming into the city that are a little bit busy, but that's to be expected with no outside connections aside from the roads. So once we get those trains in, obviously it'll all change, but it seems like this sort of beta testing of our infrastructure went pretty well, so I'm pretty happy and ready to move forward with the rest of the city. The next step was design the actual skyline itself, start sort of planting in some main arteries for the roads, and just kind of figure out what the shape of the city is going to be. So we've done that now. We've got our big highway infrastructure, we've got our big skyline, we've got all of the main arteries that are sort of coming out from the main area, and that sort of defines the center point of this grid that's going to start expanding out and away from the city. The final thing was to take care of everything, all the services, all the utilities, all of the imported goods, all of that stuff needs to be, the city needs to be self-sufficient in that way. So we've got all of these things supplied to the city itself, and it's maintaining just fine. We have, all of our utilities covered, all of our services covered, and, no issues with fire or death or any of these main game mechanics. And that means that when we start expanding, we don't have to also simultaneously worry about supplying more things to the downtown area. So we have a self-sufficient downtown, we have a tested highway infrastructure, and we have the defined sort of shape of the city done. And that means that in this next episode, we can finally start expanding the grid, laying out the metro lines, and actually doing all of our public transit. So the next episode is probably going to be almost entirely road building and line placement. I'm not going to add any buildings. I'm not going to do any of that stuff quite yet, but you will see a whole lot of new metro lines coming in. You're going to see really a big shift in the way the city functions. We're not going to have nearly as much traffic coming in via car, and this will, lighten up all of the road traffic, which will be awesome for, the future inevitable expansion of the city. So that's the plan. I don't want to talk too much specifically about how I'm going to do this expansion, although I've kind of teased it already. I've already mentioned that we're going to do a lot of, template builds for similar grids. And then what we'll probably do is just literally build 5 or 6 or 7 template blocks, use those all across the grid to just rapidly grow the population and, create this big urban sprawl. And then from there, we'll go in and we'll delete certain buildings and we'll add some personality to all the areas. So it's not the same repetitive, design, but at the same time, it does have that sort of, similarity all the way across, and it makes the city look like a nice gradient of urban expansion. And on top of that, we don't use too many props. We're going to have a very prop light design for our template so that things aren't taking all these props to build, which is very, very key in making sure that the city gets really big without using 1 billion props and running out of props super fast. So that's sort of the last step. But anyway, that's enough about the future of the project. I just wanted to emphasize that I think this 20th episode and beyond is going to be the start of something pretty different. So if you've been looking forward to seeing the city get bigger, you've been sort of maybe getting a little bit tired of a lot of block work, individual block work per episode, we should have some very different episodes coming, the next 3. So definitely check those out if you're interested in that. And then in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about the end of this episode. You can see that I'm going in, like I said, and I'm putting in a bunch of new lighting. I really like the idea of using these floodlights that point downwards underneath our highways. They kind of create this cool blue glow. I keep saying that word wrong. I have to stop for a minute and make sure I say blue glow. But yes, a nice glowing blue sort of look underneath all the highways. It does feel very Tron Legacy to me, and I kind of love that. So you'll see this probably in a lot of the areas where we have highways, but I definitely love that look whenever you look from above and you see this glowing blue sort of look underneath all the highways. Moving into the final parts of the episode now, and again, I know this is kind of a short one. Like I said, this is just the necessary last episode to tie all the things together and make sure that our current downtown is totally self-sufficient. So that's what I'm doing right now before we jump into, some future stuff. And also, I should mention this too. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're done working in the downtown area. I do like to work radially so that I don't have to worry about coming back and building in areas that are already built out, because it is very low FPS. In fact, you might have noticed earlier that I was working with the shadows turned off. That's why it looked so flat and weird. That was purely because I had 3 FPS without them, with them on. So I had to turn them off just to get even a playable frame rate. But even with that said, I do plan on coming back and adding things and changing things in the downtown area as we expand. Notably, I'm going to add in a bunch of big billboards and animated stuff in the future when we have a bigger collection of, animated billboards and things like that. So I think that the feel of the city could still change. We're going to have some cool, cosmetic, aesthetic things coming in to add more of that Blade Runner-esque, like really neon sort of feel to everything. But that stuff would probably come later on. So anyway, yeah, this last episode is mostly just to polish off, at least for now, the last few things we wanted to get done. And it does feel good to finally have this whole park area connected. I know we started the first part of the park like forever ago. There is still like an open end to the park on the other side of the city. So at some point, I'm probably going to expand that one out as well. And I'm thinking maybe like a university or something, some sort of like school complex area that kind of ends the park line so that you can walk all the way from there down to the downtown areas and have access to all of the, commercial like marketplaces and all that stuff. I think that will be a nice little addition as well. Also, this last little thing that I did, I was kind of happy with how this turned out. This is just like a little pedestrian walkway bridge. I didn't really like how it looked, just being like a big flat piece of pedestrian walkway. I wanted to have something interesting going on up here. So I decided to make a custom bridge. I probably could have just like downloaded a pedestrian, network for bridges or something, but honestly, I didn't really know like how big those were going to be, and I didn't want to have like some giant bridge taking away from the look of this area. So I tried to go with something kind of modest. It looks a little bit industrial. We've got like these little gated sort of walls, and I wanted to have some big steel girders that are overhanging the bridge. So I used a lot of pretty basic pieces, and honestly, the more that I think about it, I'd love to see a bunch of pieces like the ones I'm using right now. Some like really simple props, maybe even just like, I know I'm kind of asking for procedural objects, honestly. Like when I say these things, I realize that I should probably just use procedural objects to make them, and maybe that's the better way to go instead of making a bunch of props. What I was gonna say is like, maybe we should have like a whole bunch of basic building block pieces like these so you can make stuff like this. But honestly, the more I think about it, I think procedural objects is probably the most efficient way to do that. You don't have to use as many props that way, need more flexibility. So I should probably get into using that at some point. I know a lot of people are very, very happy with the way that mod works. So I'll probably end up using something like that in the near future. But anyway, we're pretty much at the end now, just building out this bridge and sort of tidying things up. But definitely come back next Saturday. We'll have the public transit episode out then, and then from there we've got some really awesome plans for big highway infrastructure expansion. We're going to have some big interchange episodes coming very soon. I know a lot of you guys are big fans of that, including myself. I love to make those, so I'm very excited about that as well. And then we'll get on to really just like juicing up the city and making it much bigger than it's ever been before. But that's it for today, so I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.